Welcome to the SwimStrong Dryland Podcast. We are dedicated to inspiring and educating the swimming world. Our podcast highlights the work, character, and achievements in and around the SwimStrong community. We are so excited to bring you Coach Herbie Behm from Arizona State University here. We're going to jump into getting to know him and some deeper topics, but first, we got to hit our rapid-fire questions. Coach Herbie, are you ready?
Oh, yeah.
All right, here we go. So first off, what is your walkout song?
Ooh, I pick, it's called Duel of the Fates. It's like the Darth Maul's theme song in Star Wars. I think that'd be pretty
That's awesome. If you could have a superpower, what would it be?
It'd definitely be teleportation. Just go anywhere you want immediately. That would be pretty nice.
It's a good pick. What would you be doing for a career if you weren't a swim coach?
I'd probably be, I'd want to be like a junior high art teacher. I think that would be pretty fun.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Cool. And if you could be on a movie with any star, who would it be?
I'd probably want to pick Childish Gambino. He's like a pretty good actor, a musician. He's just like so diverse in his skills, and he's been a fan of his for a long time, since back when he used to make YouTube videos when I was in high school.
Yeah.
Now he's so
that's awesome.
He would relate that. I think that'd be fun.
That's awesome. And how about your favorite swim meet memory?
Favorite swim meet memory definitely was really Pac-12s last year when we won for the first time. Being on the team where when I was swimming, we got last every time at that meet. So, to get to the opposite was pretty fun.
All right. Well, last one. What is the funniest excuse you've ever heard from someone who was late to swim practice?
You don't
have to name them.
There was a kid when I was coaching club who used to just hide in the locker room, and I'd see him like looking out and then just close the door and then looking out, and then he would have a different story as to why he was late every time. We're like, we can see you, like we're making eye contact. So, yeah,
that's hilarious.
Fun.
Well, thanks for sharing those things so people could hear a little bit more from you there. And we're going to jump into some of the main topics here. And I want to start just so people can get to know you on a more personal level. Would you mind sharing just a little bit of your journey, how you got into the sport of swimming? Obviously, you're a high-level athlete yourself, and now you're in the college coaching game. But just sharing a little bit about what that journey has looked like for you up to this point.
Yeah. So I started swimming when I was like 5, because my mom swam, my sister, who's a couple years older than me, swam, and I played a bunch of sports, but started swimming, and that was the one I was the best at and liked doing. So I grew up in New Mexico, which is a really tiny swimming community still. It's grown a little bit, but just maybe like 200 total people in the LSC. It was always fun.
Wow.
We're like meets, everybody, like literally every person. You're on like a first name basis. So yeah, I've just been doing that. Then I moved to Arizona. I was 15 years old. And yeah, I was kind of fortunate to have some really good coaches growing up. And then, came to ASU. I actually started coaching while I was at ASU for, it used to be called Sun Devil Aquatics. That was the team that trained here. So I've been coaching since, there's maybe been a week or two total consecutively in my life that haven't been at the pool, but since age 5, regularly doing it almost every day.
That's so wild. And I think it's always interesting to hear, especially from college coaches, when you were swimming yourself, what was it that attracted you to the sport? Like, do you remember why you fell in love with the sport of swimming?
Yeah, so I played a lot of different sports, and I always liked the individual sports the best, because I played like football and baseball through junior high, and there was like, I remember when I was like, okay, I don't like baseball anymore. It was we were playing this team And it was actually a kid from my school, and he was wanted to be pitcher, and he was pitcher for the other team. His dad was the coach. And he was like, okay, he's the pitcher. And he was just like literally threw balls until, so nobody even swung the bat. And we mercy ruled him because he like couldn't throw it over the plate. He was like, dude, it's somebody, like, we just want to play baseball. Like, this isn't fun. So I always liked swimming because you have so much like autonomy over what you do. Like I said, in New Mexico, I was on a really small team in Santa Fe when I started, and it was like the whole team was one group. So it was like when I was 8 years old, swimming with seniors in high school, like in the same lanes with them. And it was like I liked racing and all these different things. And it was, our team was small enough where just one coach, but enough people to where it was almost, even at that point, you kind of like were given guidelines as to what what to do in practice, and you kind of had to figure it out a lot by yourself, which I really enjoyed. So I've always kind of liked that process of like, okay, you're using practice to learn how to compete in a meet, and then you come back and practice and figure things out, and you can kind of experiment, and it's very regimented if you know that experiment worked or not. So just doing that over and over again has been something I'm obviously still doing, but I've always enjoyed.
Yeah, that's awesome. And do you feel like that mentality is the same thing that got you into coaching, or was there something unique about it that you saw different from when you were competing? And obviously you're competing at a high level, so I'm at Arizona State yourself.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, we're a part of a school record setting relay, which is incredible. So you had great success as an athlete. What was the attraction to coaching?
Yeah, well, it's funny because like I would kind of really consider myself as just like a failed athlete because I didn't go a best time the whole time through college. All my fastest times were from high school, and then came to college, and it was like literally the amount that I was swimming tripled like right away. I was working way harder than I ever had before, and just got slower. So it was kind of like very skeptical as to what should we do in swimming, what should happen. And it was kind of a cool story because my last year swimming, our coach who coached the sprinters moved to coach Cesar Cielo, and we did that year. We like basically everybody was in the distance group until it was supposed to be like January, February. We'll be a sprint group, but the sprint coach left, so there was only 4 of us, and they were like, "Hey, we're not getting a new sprint coach, so you guys are on your own, or you can keep doing distance." And it was like, this is the best thing that's ever happened, guys. Like, we're gonna do this. So it was like went out, bought 2 stopwatches, and we would like time each other. And it like literally coached ourselves for the last bit, and that was broke a school record in medley relay that year. And that was actually the first time I made a best time the whole time in college. So that's why I was like, I think this will I feel like I can do this with other people if I can make it faster. So that was the start of it, and I was kind of fortunate, I think, to start that way because I got to experiment early, and it kind of removed a lot of what could potentially be anxieties about this. We're like, okay, this is one. It's like, okay, we're just figuring it. Like everybody is just figuring this out as we go. And if you can just be like logical and think about what the problem is, like, okay, how do we swim our race faster? What's our individual weakness? What makes us good? And then how do we just do that in practice over and over again? It's literally as simple as that. That doesn't mean it's easy, but it is fairly simple, the whole coaching style of what you need to do. There doesn't need to be like fitting into a box or anything of what type of coach you are. As long as you're kind of critically thinking and looking at the athlete in front of you, it normally will work out pretty well.
That's a really cool story. That's pretty unique, I think, compared to most people having to coach yourself in college when a coach has left. What what resources did you use? What things what was your mindset as far as what you were going to experiment with in that time? And then to go that best time must have been thrilling too and set the
Yeah.
school record. But what did that process look like? Do you mind sharing a little more details
Yeah.
of what you
So it
did?
was really just a lot of reading. Like even before, I've always was into into coaching and into that side of training. Like I remember even my freshman year is when I started ordering. Like first book I ordered was it's just called the Swim Coaching Bible. I'm sure a lot of coaches have seen that. Still actually a pretty good book. And then started getting more of that, and then actually started getting really into the kind of like I had one coach who I swam with in the summer who was really into like this Soviet training styles and told me all of these books to read and ordered those and had already read quite a bit about that before started training. But it was like, okay, we're just going to do what these books say, and we're just going to kind of try this. And it was for track and field mostly. Was like the specifics of it, but like, okay, we have to understand the physiology, apply that to swimming. And yeah, that was kind of the guiding light. So I think I consider myself very fortunate that way of kind of having mentors of people who have written these books and done all of this. Were really the biggest influences. And I kind of, when I started, was like, okay, I'm just going to like not talk to any coaches or anything about that, like just read these books of people who aren't even writing about our sport, but try to apply the principles. And yeah, that's still been kind of my main thing that I think helps me continue to learn is like trying to read every single day something different, something new, and continuing to learn in that sense, because it's it makes it fun. Honestly, kind of inspires me when you read something looking at things in a different light. Helps me think of like, okay, why am I doing this? Why should I be doing this? Should I be trying something new? But yeah, it just kind of keeps things fresh and exciting for myself.
That's cool. That's really cool. I love the desire to always be learning and to look at things from a unique perspective. It seems like a lot of coaches, not a lot, but there are coaches who lose that, especially over time, especially once they start seeing success, which you guys have obviously seen at Arizona State. I'm wondering how has that changed at all for you? Has the hunger or thirst for knowledge grown through this process? What's that looked like from when you were just figuring it out to now, and how big of a part of your journey has that been, just continuing to learn?
Oh, I think it's definitely grown. I think that's something that I used to kind of do. I kind of start my day every day with that. Like I think about that as trying to set aside about an hour every day to just read and learn that way. It's definitely, I feel like, like simplicity lies on the other side of complexity. I used to think these topics were like so complex and complicated. And now when you kind of understand it at a deeper level, it's like, oh no, these are actually, they're fairly simple ideas. And it's the application that can sometimes be difficult. But it is like, I used to be much more afraid to try different things, to try new things. And it was like really like basic, like literally the most basic periodization of like, okay, we did 650s. Now we need to do 8. And like, don't change anything too much, because that's going to make it too confusing. We're not going to know what's working or not. Now it's kind of like the constant change and trying to kind of experiment every day as well, and being okay with that. And if you kind of understand the physiology, you're able to at least experiment more. So I think it's kind of a reward for at least I think I have a decent understanding. I might not. But yeah, like once you kind of understand the basic principles, you can play around with them a lot more, and not do exactly like, okay, well, this book said we had to do N50s on 2 minutes, so we're going to do that exactly like it says. And it's like, okay, well, they just picked 2 minutes because that was just the time they picked. And like, okay, these aren't as like there's no magic pill, there's no magic formula, but if you
Mm-hmm.
have the basics right and you're consistent with those, well then you're probably on the right track. And you can explore and make it fun in there. It's like I think it's Pablo
Yeah.
Picasso had a quote that it's like learn the rules like a pro so you can play with them like an artist. And that's kind of the way that I like to try and do things, where it's like, okay, there's these, the physiology is what matters. And then how do we make this engaging and fun and exciting? And yeah, that's difficult to do that. But it makes it a lot more fun for myself and hopefully
Yeah.
for all the kids as well.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, and definitely you know your stuff, and it's been really cool to see you, you know, those things being applied to Arizona State, and to hear a little bit more inside your mind. And then obviously working with Coach Bob Bowman too. I'm curious with you guys, do you have the exact same philosophy? Do you guys have different philosophies? How do you guys work together
Yeah,
with the different groups and athletes that you coach, and
yeah.
what does that look like as a coaching team?
Yeah, so I think we have, I'd say our bottom philosophy is identical, and that's like it's the physiology. And we're trying to train the physiology and make like measurable changes to the organism on a cellular level. How we do that is much different. Obviously, like I mean, one, I'm working with the sprinters. He's working with more all the mid D people. So like that, there's a different requirement for that.
Mm-hmm.
But the kind of the way in which we go about it, it is very similar. Obviously, we have our different, like just different personalities for for that, which leads to some differences. But for the most part, it works pretty well, and I think that's what does work well together, because we kind of know what the goal is, and then if there's people going back and forth in groups, we know what we're trying to accomplish, and like it means the same thing, because that's what is confusing in our sport. Because like if you say, okay, we're doing a lactate set, that means like something different to every coach in the world.
Right.
So at least that we have like the same kind of understanding and similar goals, to where it's like, okay, on like Wednesdays, let's say we're doing, the sprinters are doing, I call it like specific developmental work, which most teams would call it lactate. But if it's something like 650s on 3 minutes, where we're trying to be half of our 100 pace or faster, and his group's doing like 1050s all fast, 4 on 130, 1 on 120, 1 on 110, 1 on a minute, 1 on 50, 1 on 40, 1 on 30. Well, then we can kind of like, we both know like, okay, this is stimulating the anaerobic side of things in two different ways, where one's really
Mm-hmm.
working the more top end speed, one's really working like how you maintain and struggle through that. We can have people who need, if whatever their weakness is, put them in that spot to get stimulated in the way that's going to help them as an individual. And that's where you can get kind of creative, where people are feeling like, oh, I'm just randomly going over here one day. But it's like, well, it's organized, because like you need this, maybe you need just a different way of going about it for today. And really that's what I think works well. But yeah, it comes down to
Yeah.
both of ours, as well as I think everybody else on the staff's philosophy, is like looking at the physiology first, and having people fit into that based on their own individual strengths and weaknesses.
Mm. I think that's really unique in that you guys are thinking about the physiology, the science behind what's actually happening.
Yeah,
Um, you know, and that's, I don't know if that's a dive that a lot of coaches take. And so I love hearing that. That's something that we're very passionate about at
yeah,
SwimStrong, is making sure that what we do follows the science, right? That there's a why, there's a reason behind it. And I think as a coach or as an athlete, if they're swimming for you guys at Arizona State, and they know there's a purpose behind all of this, that these coaches have studied and really put time and thought and attention towards, and thought about how to apply it to me personally.
Yeah.
That's really motivating as an athlete, right? Like, even if you don't love the set because you're like, oh, this is going to be rough today, there's a purpose. And you can fight through that and grow the mentality of, like, when you know why, then you can be so much more disciplined because it's meaningful to you and you know what's on the other side. So, but how did you get that mindset of always thinking about the physiology as opposed to just, whatever? There's a lot of different ways in which I've heard coaches go about things, but you sound very cerebral, which I absolutely love. And I'm wondering, like, why? What was the mindset behind that? Was it a personal experience? Was it just a unique interest of yours? How did you gain that type of thinking?
Yeah, well, it kind of goes back to my example of like kind of considering myself as a failed swimmer. Because there was like I know it was always, I had several coaches who were always like, okay, belief is the number one thing. All we got to do is believe in what we're doing. And then if you swam slow, they would come back and say, oh, it's because you're not believing in what we're doing. And you're like, no, I believe in what we're doing. Like, it's just not, like, there's a point that it has to make a change. So that was like, I mean, my biggest frustration that I think, and I specifically remember going in and asking, like, okay, why are we doing certain things, and why, like, what is supposed to be happening to me? And that was taken as like a sign of disrespect. And it's like, oh, it's because you don't believe in it. And this is why it's not working. So it's like this loop that is incorrect, to where they're like, oh, the only reason you fail is because you don't believe. And the only way you can fail is if you don't believe. And you're like, well, like, what are we? Is this just imagination land? Like, why do we practice? If all I have to do is believe I can go a 17 in the 50 free, like, someone on our team would be able to do that, because there's delusional people out there. So, like, clearly that's incorrect. Not that belief isn't an incredibly important thing, but if that's all you're relying on, it's wrong. So I always wanted to be able to explain to any athlete I'm working with why we're doing something, what it's supposed to do. And then if we fail, we can come back and hopefully have like records of what they've done. And we can at least break it down and see where we went wrong. Because it's not always like, it's not the quest for finding the perfect formula, but it is like a process of learning. And then failure is kind of expected, and we can go back and cross off the things that don't work, or where we went wrong, or at least have some sort of tracking to see where progression slowed down. But yeah, that's always been the biggest thing for me, because I feel like I know how that feels to be told you're failing for just like, well, you didn't trust yourself. And you're like, what? What did I totally thought I was going to swim fast. I promise you, behind the blocks. And so yeah, I've always been really passionate about that, because it is disappointing when you can't, you have no idea why, like, failure is occurring. And I guess just for coaches listening, know that I definitely don't have all the answers. Nobody's going to have all the answers, and we're not expected to have all the answers, but having that, like, honesty between you as the coach and the swimmer of like, okay, here's what we're trying. Here's what I think is going to work. Here's why I think it's going to work. And then the answer isn't always going to be, and you're going to go best times every time. Sometimes it's not, but then we can go back and be like, okay, that was an experiment. That was not, like, we can try something else. And from my experience, kids are so much more receptive and excited to hear that, rather than like, okay, here's what we're doing. It's going to work. The only way it doesn't work is you messing it up. Okay, we know it's a relationship, and it's like both people working towards a common goal, and having that as like the underlying connection is really important.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about, I think it's a lot more unique than you might even realize, being able to have the type of humble mindset of being able to take feedback as a coach and say, because I think the reason that maybe a lot of coaches struggle with what you're saying right there is that they feel like they failed, right? And we always preach to our athletes, like, don't be afraid to fail. If you're going to be
Yeah.
great, you have to fail over and over and over
Yeah.
again. But then if something reflects poorly on a coach, like we want to be like, oh, no, it's
Yeah.
just you. And like your personal experience is like, no, like I'm trying so hard and
Yeah.
like what we're doing is not working. There has to be something more. And then, you, not for nothing, you coached yourself for a couple months and won a best time. Like there's got to be something unique about that, and pretty cool speaking to your coaching mind as well.
Yeah.
But as far as like just the mentality that you have to have as a coach, because you're talking about the nuts and bolts of, trial and error and experimentation and physiology and all these different things that do make sense. But then you also have to deal with a personal ego, right? Where how do
Yeah.
you get that out of the way where you're like, I don't care if this fails, this fails. I'm fine to take blame as a coach. I don't need to place it on the athlete. I don't need credit when they do well, and I can
Yeah.
take blame when they don't do well. Like I feel like
Yeah.
you as a coach should be able to shoulder both of those things and
Yeah.
just free the athlete up. But how do you get to that point? Like why do you have that mentality? How did you get it, if that's something you've thought about before? Because I know that's not easy for a lot of
Yeah.
coaches.
I think that's something also, like I know myself personally, that's something I kind of have to always work on and always remind myself that it's like, okay, if someone does poorly, if somebody doesn't like the practice, if somebody doesn't agree with what I'm doing, it's not about me. And if you make it about like, okay, here's this training program that we're working on together, and it's kind of both of us feeding this separate thing. Like if they think I mean, it's college, we're recruiting, so we're talking to kids all the time who sometimes kids you want to like you are just like, no, I don't want to go to that school. So it's like very humbling in that aspect as well. But it's separate from who we are, and it's not like, okay, if they swim bad, it's not that like I'm a bad coach or did something wrong. Like that just happens sometimes. And it's kind of the almost kind of paradox of coaching, that in order to be a really good coach, you can't be thinking about yourself. It's about them.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to keep it about them is like it's hard, because it's like it is, we all have these careers and we have personal goals and things like that. But when you kind of understand like, okay, the way you'll achieve those is almost forgetting about your own personal goals and making it about them and watching them chase their goals, well then it's at least easier. And like I mean, I be honest, I don't have that figured out by any means. But I think that's what helps me, to where it's like, okay, you're looking at I mean, our team, we have almost 70 people on it, and they all have their own individual goals. And yeah, we have our team goals as well. But like at the end of the day, they're doing this for themselves. There's this team aspect that's really fun and a part of it. But if they don't feel like they're part of the team and they're able to have some autonomy and like chasing towards the things they want to do, well, everything
Mm-hmm.
else doesn't matter. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, I mean, like, that wasn't really a specific answer to that question, but I don't know if there really is.
Yeah.
But really, it's about remembering who is doing this, and it's like it is their swimming career. It's not like mine. That ship has sailed,
Yeah.
and we have to try and help them. And it's one of those things where you just keep learning, and it's like we have so many unique different people that it's like we're always able to learn as coaches. And if you get into the part of making the learning the fun part, well then like the results, that's just secondary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What you said is, I mean, I think spot on to what we would say to our athletes too. Like they have a poor swim. Hey, you're not just a swimmer. Like
Yeah.
you're much more. That's something you do. It's not who you
Yeah.
are. And same thing to coaches. You're not just a coach. Like it's something you do. It's not a part. And
Yeah.
whenever you start to make that a part of your identity, then I think a poor swim hits you a lot harder because you're like, oh,
Yeah.
this is everything to me. And so
Oh, yeah.
I really like the way you put that. And also love how you're talking about, hey, I don't have it figured out. I'm still figuring it out as I
Yeah.
go. And just that same lifelong learner mentality in your character as in your coaching. And I think everybody can learn something from that, coaches, athletes, parents alike, in all their different roles in the journey there. And so I think that's awesome. And I'm wondering how that type of mindset has bled into the Arizona State team culture. Because I know as an athlete, I would love to swim for someone with that mindset who is like, hey, like this isn't about me, and I want to dive into the science, and I want to see how we can best help you achieve your goals and do the best you can. And I'm happy to experiment with different things, happy to give you some autonomy. There's a lot of research out there about how when athletes are owning their journey, like you're saying a lot of things, and you've probably done the research on these things, but you're saying a lot of things that are very much backed by research too. It's not just like good philosophies. Um, and so as an athlete, I think it kind of makes sense why so many people have been, coming to Arizona State in recent years, and even pro athletes coming over and being like, hey, there's something going on over here. Like what's in the
Yeah.
water over there? And it sounds like it's not like there's this incredible magic pill that no one's ever heard of or seen. It sounds like there's really strong character and philosophy. And
Yeah.
anyway, I'm wondering if you could give a little insight into the culture at Arizona State and what that looks like.
Yeah. I think that's, I think myself have been influenced by the culture here as much, probably a lot more than like the influence I've given as well. But it's trying to be the same thing that I was just explaining of having. I mean, something Bob always says is the process is more important than the outcome, and it's focused on the process of that and the process of training and learning how to like training and how to like to compete. Something that I'm a big believer in. I know that I think everybody here will definitely, all the coaches, hopefully the swimmers are figuring this out as well. But like, we don't like to talk about this being like a setup meet or a preparation meet or anything like that, because when the moment comes, it's going to be the moment. It's not going to be a later moment. So if we're always talking about a later moment, we're training ourselves to be focused on the future rather than right now, which is that's literally all that's real.
That's good.
So practicing that in how we do it every day, every meet, is the most important thing, in my opinion, to be ready to go. And then when the moment comes, it's not anything bigger than what it is. It's just another 100 freestyle or 200 fly or whatever you're swimming, whether it's at NCAA's, Olympic trials, a dual meet, practice. It's learning how to be completely focused on this moment, accepting the parts of it that you don't like, and doing the best you can with those cards that you've been dealt. And if you do that on a long enough time, hopefully you make progress there. And when the big moment comes, you'll be ready for it. But we don't want that mindset of all that matters is this one swim in March at NCAAs or whatever it is, because one, then it's putting too much pressure on yourself to that we're like nothing matters except that. So if you do well, you're like, well, this doesn't matter. You're like, okay, we can celebrate some things along the way, but yeah, that's really the philosophy. And I mean, we say that all the time. It's like how you do anything is how you do everything. So like once you leave practice, I mean, we've just finished about half an hour ago, and these kids, it's like, okay, you're eating breakfast and you're in class. Be focused on class. And then you're doing your homework. Focus on that. And then you're in the pool. Focus on this. Don't be worrying about your test that's at noon, and then practice. You're thinking about, oh well, I think I screwed up this on the test. It's just like your mind's nowhere. So keeping it here on what we're doing is the most valuable thing we can have. And hopefully by the time that those big moments come, because it's like, we like to say they're all the same, but there are things that are bigger. At least we put that on ourselves. But these higher pressure situations, if you're kind of used to learning about yourself and learning like how you handle different stressors, you'll be prepared when those perceived stressors are much higher. And hopefully you have the skills to handle those rather than like, okay, we're going to do 7 kicks every wall because that last turn in your 200 fly in March it's going to be like always talking about that. We almost never talk about that. And that doesn't mean it's not planned, but keeping kids in the moment is what we need.
That's something that a lot of people struggle with. And I wonder, are there any specific things or tools you give your athletes to help them with that? How to stay in the moment, not be thinking about the tests that they just struggle with or have their mind somewhere else? Because I do think it's very powerful. Like people talk about time is our most scarce or greatest resource. And I would take it a step further and say even more than that, it's our attention, like what we do with our time, right? And multitasking itself, it's been proven like it's a myth. You can't do 2 things at the same, like the human brain isn't meant to be able to do 2 things well at the same time. And so there's a lot of wisdom in what you're saying. And I'm wondering, are there tools that you've given your athletes or just practice over time, or just what's something you do to help encourage your athletes to stay in the present moment?
Yeah, I think one, it's kind of core of this conversation is explaining to them why that's important. And then we do have a lot of things in practice that force that. One thing that the sprinters do, we have a lot of, we'll have like max speed days where we're going as fast as we can. And a lot of times we'll just have one shot at it, or it'll all build up to like one rep. That's everything is that. And at the beginning, it was always like, oh, let me do that again. Like I can do that. And it's like, no, you don't get to do it again. That was the chance. Like you probably can do better, but next time we do it, which might be a couple months from now, you can try again there. So I think that's an important thing. It's funny because like Ryan Held actually pointed that out one day. He's like, you're the first coach who, when kids ask to do it again or like do another race, you just say no every time. And it was funny because I had never really thought about that, but then I explained to him, and hopefully everybody understands. It's like, well, that's how the meet works, where most people end up leaving wishing they had a second chance, but it just doesn't happen that way. And if we got our shot in prelims, and if you don't do that, well, then finals doesn't happen. So I think training that way is really good. Like one thing that especially later in the season, we'll do starts and relay starts a lot less, but it'll be like, okay, you get 1 relay start today and it's got to be good. And they're like, but I need to practice it. And you're like, well, you got to make this one good. And I actually think it's that same thing of like, that's just how our memory works, to where, I didn't step all the way to the end of the block, or I went too early or too late. You have one thing to think about, and then next time you can hopefully make that one thing better. And that's better than doing like, oh, well, I did 12 relay starts. The first 7 were bad, but the last 5, those were really good. Like, well, what did you actually learn? Like, what do you remember from that? So having less opportunities sometimes can lead to more learning, if done correctly.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's something that I haven't heard many coaches speak like that, and it's something that myself and Coach Adam at Eagle Aquatics believe in strongly too. And you can have a totally different opinion about this, but we don't do time trials at championship swim meets, because if you don't qualify for whatever you're trying to qualify for in the moment, there's no second chances at the biggest meets, right? There's no, and in life, most of the time, there's no second chances. Like, this is your moment. So if you don't do it when you step up to the blocks right now, like, we're not going to do it again. Not because it's necessarily a bad thing. And if you're a coach who believes in, time trials, that's perfectly fine. But just the mentality behind it, sounds similar to what you're saying, and I really like that.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah, I think that's exactly right, and it's that kind of what you said of like, okay, if you don't get to do a time trial or that at whatever meet, it's like this isn't a punishment. It's just like we're trying to get you ready for the next time faster. And I think kind of leaving that sometimes, like I've told kids a lot of times, if the meet doesn't go as well, it's like leaving the meet hungry is sometimes better than being totally fulfilled, because you're like, okay, I know what I got to do. I got to get better at these things. And if you kind of make that the core of your training of like, okay, we're looking at each practice, each meet as just feedback as to what we can do to take the next step. And it's like the joy comes in taking steps, not getting to the end of the staircase. And if you can get to where you do enjoy that, well, then it's fun. And then even it's been pretty rewarding of sometimes kids here who do finish with like a really good swim, and they're like, okay, yeah, like this wall, I was like shallow on this breakout. Like next time I won't make that mistake. And it's like, okay, cool. They're already thinking about that. And I guess also with kind of reminded me of another thing of how we train that in our warm down in meets. It's always, I try and do like 300 or so, just straight, whatever you want, and then give them like a specific technical thing that they can improve on from the race and work on that. So it's still easy and smooth, but it's like, okay, your hand was coming out here, so you're going to go like 300 to shake out, and then 1625s, like with just that paddle on, like 2 with buoy at ankle, 2 constant kick, just working on keeping that hand under your body. So it's still like physiology of that slow, sustained, like helping just metabolize lactate. And then also it's skill oriented. So they're hopefully making progress, not just swimming slowly back and forth. And it kind of forces that mindset of like, okay, think about what you did in the previous race, where you can improve, and let's start. We're practicing right now. We're not waiting until Monday to do that, because it's like why not? You know?
Yeah, you're gonna hop in the pool anyway and be swimming, so why not be thinking while you're doing it? And you're giving them you're also coaching like when you're at a swim meet, it's actually one of the most opportune times to coach, right? Because it's in that high pressure environment. And but you're giving them just one thing to focus on, it sounds like, when they hit the warm down pool, which is exactly what you would want to do, because you can't make 3 habit changes all at once. Oh, you did this, X, Y, and Z all wrong, so go try and fix all these things. You gave the example of giving them one thing, and that will stick too, and they'll remember. And what better opportunity than right after they just did it, and when they're thinking about it, I think it'll probably stick for the long term. So that's an awesome idea. I think coaches should implement that everywhere. That's an amazing idea. Why wait until next practice? Hey, we'll figure that out like next week in practice, and maybe you forgot by then.
Exactly.
So, well, I want to finish up and just hear a little bit about the wall behind you. So I see all kinds of things on the wall, and it's always interesting to me how people pick what goes up on their wall. Do you mind sharing some of the pictures and what's behind you?
These are all new. This is the Sprint Wall of Fame that we've got. So we've got kind of everybody who's made international meets. So far, all of these guys were at the World Championships, or like Grant House was at Duel in the Pool last year. Everybody else was Worlds this summer. So we're starting that. If you get that's the deal. If you make a World Championships, you have to donate a cap to the Wall of Fame. It gets put up there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
and then that one's Francisco Sanchez is the only 50 free national champ we've ever had, which was in 1996. So hopefully we get somebody to, if you win, you get a picture as well as the cap.
That's awesome. Well, you guys are definitely moving in a way where I think you're gonna have a lot of pictures on that wall. So very impressive stuff that's going on over there, man. And I guess actually one final one for the people that hear. What would be your favorite thing just being a part of Arizona State? What would be that thing that you love most coaching at Arizona State?
It's definitely the people. I mean, we're pretty lucky to have the group that we have, to where everybody, it's rare when you're ever at a place with a bunch of people who like, oh man, you guys all kind of think the same as me. Like, this is fun. uh, so having that here is really cool, to where and literally every single kid on the team is excited about what we're doing, likes working hard. It's like we literally never have to get mad at kids for skipping practice or anything like that. So we're fortunate to have that, actually, that everybody enjoys working hard, enjoys getting better, and we have a lot of like unique personalities. It's cool that you can have like very different people all fit in and all have fun doing the same thing. So that's definitely what I like the most, because it's been I mean, super fun. Like, really not just I feel like the last year or two has been to where it's been like more noticed, but it's kind of been that steady climb of just people making themselves better. And it's like, okay, how do we keep getting better? And kids here are great, where they're asking like, I mean, some of the kids were like, hey, you gotta, like, literally requiring kids like, okay, you have to spend an hour this weekend doing something fun that's not progress related. Like, just let your mind, you need that. So it's definitely, having a group like this is rare, and something that you can't really plan. Like, I'd like to think that it's all organized, but there's some luck going into that, of just getting all the right people here at the right time. So it's just enjoying that.
Well, a part of that luck is you being there, you guys having an awesome coaching staff, an awesome group of athletes, and there's definitely a lot that goes into that, that you're being humble about, but it's amazing. And it's really fun to watch from the outside looking in what's happening at Arizona State. And I think you alluded to something. People see what's happening in the last year or two, but they don't realize everything that's gone in behind the scenes to get to that point. And, you know, it's the curse of the social media age. You see the things that are posted, but you never see the behind the scenes work and the relationships and the grind and the everything that goes into it. And but I love hearing, at the end of the day, your passion for the sport. Ultimately, it's about the people. Your favorite thing about Arizona State being the people, and all those other passions that you have for helping them to be great comes back to them. And so anyway, Coach Herbie, it's been a pleasure to have you on here. Thanks so much for taking the time and sharing all your insights with us. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks. It was great talking. We'll definitely stay in touch.
Yes, sir. Thank you for listening to the SwimStrong Dryland Podcast. If you'd like to be a part of the SwimStrong Dryland family, you can reach out to us via email or social media. You can also follow SwimStrong Dryland on YouTube and TikTok for more educational content.